Every dad sometimes reaches for the wrong tool. We shout when patience would be a better idea. We butt in when maybe we just need to lay back and observe. Or we lecture when discipline is probably the right answer. Like, knowing the right tool for each situation requires discernment. And it really helps us to have a good example. And oddly enough, Beowulf gives us one in this case. Beowulf faces 3 monsters, 3 different battlefields, and he ends up using 3 different tools. Now, they're not the only tools he's got, but this example gives us something to latch onto, so let's dive into it. If you're new here, I'm Brandon Wilborn. This is Imago Dad, where we talk about faith and fatherhood, but we kind of go at it from the perspective of classic stories and scripture. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, hope you'll join me, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. So, these 3 core battles of Beowulf is the monster Grendel, where Beowulf decides that he's heard weapons can't harm this thing. So Beowulf goes after the monster by using his strength of his hands. No armor, just his hands. No weapons, just his hands. So the second fight is Grendel's mother. And instead of being in the halls of Heorot on land, where he's got his footing, he dives into a murky lake surrounded by water demons. She grabs him in that water, and somehow he gets into like an air pocket or something. Otherwise, he probably would have drowned. But the sword that he brings, a gift from the guy who at first opposed him, fails. It can't hurt her, and it actually breaks. And Providence gives him the right tool for the job. He has to go looking for it. And he finds in this cave a great treasure of a sword forged by giants somewhere around the time of the flood, or after the flood. And it's magical. So this sword has the capacity to kill her. And, he cuts off Grendel's head with it, and then the sword kind of melts because of the intensity of the fight. It just disintegrates down to the hilt. This is actually my favorite part of the story, is the fight with Grendel's mom. But we won't get too much into details. You can read it yourself. Read along with me if you like. It's a lot of fun. The third fight that's core to the story is when he's old and he goes to fight a dragon that somebody wakes up in his land. And in this case, he's on land again, but he knows the danger. So he doesn't reach just for a weapon. He goes defensive, and he says a wooden shield is going to burn up if I go against a dragon. So he picks some guys to make him an iron shield to stand up against the fire. I believe, if I remember correctly, his sword again breaks. He is so strong that he overtaxes any sword, is the way Tolkien translates it. And so again, his sword can barely hold up against his swing because it's so powerful. And so in this case, it's not just the tool of the defensive tool and the weapon, but the tool of, he finally has somebody come to his aid and help him. So he has the tool of allies. Sometimes, as we've said, Beowulf picks the right tool. Sometimes he takes the wrong one at first. Then he has to adjust. That's part of the discernment, is recognizing, oh, this isn't working for me. I need to change my strategy and change the tools I'm using to use the right one. I think the time that I personally saw this most was with my own dad. And he was never a chef. I love to cook, but he was never a chef. And he takes this expensive paring knife and he tries to use it as a screwdriver. And probably predictably, he snaps the tip off of this really nice paring knife. And for years, that paring knife had no tip. It just sat in the drawer with a big old chunk off the end of it. But that example of, we've all done that. We've all grabbed the wrong tool and in some cases hurt ourselves to do that. Beowulf's particular scenario where he's fighting these different monsters, it actually reminded me of a passage in Isaiah 28, 24 to 29, where he tells this parable about a farmer and how God helps the farmer to use the right tool for the right job and to take the right process for each thing that he's trying to do, for each type of grain or herb or whatever that he's trying to grow. So I wanted to read that real quick just to show you that this wisdom of discernment is both experience, but also it's guided. God doesn't just let us try things out and fail over time. He does eventually guide us into the right thing. So Isaiah 28, starting at verse 24. When a farmer plows for planting, does he plow continually? Does he keep on breaking up and working the soil? When he has leveled the surface, does he not sow caraway and scatter cumin? Does he not plant wheat in its place, barley in its plot, and spelt in its field? His God instructs him and teaches him the right way. And it goes on to talk not just about the planting and the plowing, but after the harvest, the right way to harvest each piece, each element, or each crop, and the right way to process each crop. And it finishes with this: all this comes from the Lord Almighty, whose plan is wonderful, whose wisdom is magnificent. We can take Isaiah's idea and combine it with the example of Beowulf to see, oh, okay, I'm going to go in with this plan against this problem or this threat or this conflict. I'm going to take these tools because I think those are the right ones. And when it doesn't work out, you adjust. You find a new tool, or you find a new way to do something. In writing, I think my favorite part of a lot of fantasy stories and myths is the gifting of the tools for the story. Because they're always given the right tools. They may just not always understand what they're for and when to use them. So I couldn't help but put a scene like that into my own fantasy work, where this young man is given the items that show he's part of this monastic order of warriors. So he's given the symbolic belt that's also a weapon. He's given the staff that's their weapon of choice. And then he's also given a mysterious item that he's never even heard about, that he can use against his enemies, or when the time is right. And they have to learn when to use these things, even though they're not officially being given the authority to use them. It's kind of a ruse in the story. You can read about it. I'll leave a link to the book below if you're interested. What about for dads? I talked about my own dad literally using the wrong tool, and I've done that too. But what about with our kids and our families and our wives? Or even your girlfriend if you're not married, or if you haven't got kids yet. Your coworkers, your brothers and sisters. What tools do we have for these conflicts that come up? For the things that we are trying to solve as a problem? Well, you've got, especially with kids, your voice. That's a big one. How you use your voice in different situations. Are you being harsh? Are you sounding angry even when you're not really? Because they're sensitive to that. Not that you have to put on a fake happy voice, but being aware that kids are going to respond to a tone. And they know it. They know when they're in trouble. Discipline. Discipline is obviously a tool. And the Bible is very clear that it's a necessary tool. God uses discipline to shape us, and we, as our kids are growing and learning, use discipline as a tool to show them what's right and wrong, to show them how to behave, how to act, and to correct behavior that is either outright harmful or wrong. It's a tool. You don't overuse it if you can help it, but you got to use discernment and wisdom for that. Another one is just your presence and your example. Sometimes just being there, cuddling with the kid, wrestling with the kid, sitting down and watching a show they want to watch together, playing a game with them. That presence itself is a tool that's in your tool belt and works to great effect. Your example, as they see you tackle problems, do you give up or do you find a way? Do you adjust and find a better tool? Or do you just use the wrong one because it's easy? That's going to teach them. The virtues that you embody, which ones are you good at? Honesty, courage, faithfulness, which ones do you need work in? They're going to learn from that. These are tools that you can use. And even your learning process can be a tool. My favorite, though, is actually our flaws. If you can be honest with your kids about your flaws as a dad, as a man, and how you're trying to improve, that teaches them immensely that, one, you're still curious and still learning, but also that it's okay to be on a learning process. It also keeps you humble. If you're willing to apologize when you make a mistake with them, you're willing to show them you don't know everything. Obviously, as they're getting older, it's easier. One of the ways I think that we can do this is through stories. Your personal stories is what I mean. Not just, I talk a lot about, classic stories and fairy tales and things like that, but just your personal story and testimony of the things you have struggled with and overcome, especially when it comes to faith and virtue. Those stories are powerful. They bond you as a family. They bond you as a person. They make you a real person who is not just, oh, my parents hate this because they would never do this bad thing. But if you can share, oh, I failed before, and here's how I've overcome it. That's an honesty that kids don't often expect. As a youth ministry pastor, I see this all the time, where kids don't really know who their parents are or were before faith, and it makes them get an incorrect picture, and it creates a barrier or a gap in that relationship that doesn't need to be there. So finally, I just want to leave you with that encouragement of, the story of Beowulf, where he fought 3 different battles, ended up using a different tool, but didn't always pick the right one right away. He used other tools like words and wealth, which we'll get into in other later walk and talks like this. But also the encouragement of Isaiah. He will show you if you're listening. The Lord will guide you into what tool to use, when to use it, how much to use it, if you're listening. So seek him first as you're trying to be a good dad and be a good husband, or just be a good man. He will be there and he will help guide you. Even when it doesn't look like it, he is still pulling the levers to help things turn out and for you to go the right path, even if it's the harder path, which it often is. All right. Again, as always, this is just like my rough draft of the walk and talk. If you would like the full polished version, the essay, it's going to be on my Substack. The link will be in the description below. And God bless, man. Have a great day.